Several years ago, I wanted to have a retreat after a long walk, several years ago. And I have this friend of mine who I called Professor Edward, pathologist, which I knew in Bristol where I was working. So he arranged for me to go to a monastery. The monastery is a very quiet place, very quiet. And then I stayed in that monastery, and I happened to split into the books for the monastery, started reading them. It was then one of the things I read there was that my sermon should not be more than 37 minutes. And it was also in that place I read that short sleep will lead to short death, will lead to cut short of your life. And then when you sleep longer than you should, it will also cut your life short. And ever since that has stimulated me to read the literature and to get involved. And I've followed up with many TED lectures on the role of sleep to health. So with that introduction, I will be speaking to you today on the comprehensive sleep health, exploring the interplay between sleep, health, and economic development. So, okay. Now, these are all the outlines I will take, so there's no point mentioning them. Now, a book I'm so familiar with and I read every day, several chapters of it, and has inspired my life. It said, He giveth His beloved sleep. And I began to ask her, is sleep so rare that someone has to give you sleep? Why is it so important? What is sleep? Now, Merriam-Webster dictionary, which I like because of its simplicity, describes sleep as a natural, easily reversible periodic state of many living things. I'm told that the ants are the only being that don't sleep. That is marked by the absence of wakefulness and by the loss of consciousness of one's surrounding. It's accompanied by typical body posture, lying down and closing your eyes, an occurrence of dreaming and change in brain activity and physiological function. Now let's look at the history of sleep. Our modern definition of success is largely responsible for the devaluation of sleep. It's also why sleep has come to be valued overall. Across the spectrum, in my discussion with very leading politicians, leading spiritual men, they actually boast they don't sleep long. I've heard people say that I don't sleep more than 4 hours. I don't even need it. And to many of them, it's an accomplishment that you don't sleep long. I know one of the top presidents of the country, which I wouldn't mention, always boasts that I do only with 4 hours. And so the modern definition of success is that man who is driven by trying to make it and lead the people and at the expense of his own health and believing that he can do without it. Now, in 800 BC, the ancient Egyptians constructed temples to worship the goddess Is. Their congregants are priests who gather to interpret dreams. Interpretation of dreams was so important in the ancient time. The Greeks and Romans also adopted the same thing, and actually they worship God associated with sleep. One of those gods are the Hypnos and Somnus. And we can see that these names are also similar. They bear the roots to which we use the same term, hypnosis and so on. Now, one of the first scientific theories about sleep dates back to 400 to 450 BC, and by a Greek doctor and philosopher who postulated that sleep is the result of blood on the surface of the body withdrawing into the interior. 100 years later, Aristotle, In Aristotle, when you talk of Greek philosophy, you think of Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. Aristotle has more science, while Socrates have more philosophies. Now, he said that sleep is a form of seizure of the primary sense organ, and also it's unable to actualize its powers arising of necessity, and also conservation. He was near modern definition of sleep, which is conserving our energy, conserving our resources. But the seizure did not really get the modern thinking of sleep. Kedorf says that about sleep. He says it was highly valued in medieval Europe as a time of calm, relaxation, when thoughts and perceptions mingled into dreams. It's very rare to tell somebody, keep away to think about it. If you want to get people to think and come up with vision, say sleep over it. And so sleep becomes the thoughts and perceptions mingled with dreams. In 1924, Nathaniel was the founder of sleep research. He developed the first sleep lab at the University of Chicago. And in 1953, his graduate student, Eugene, and himself discovered the REM sleep. In the 1970s came the publication of Sleep, which was the first peer-reviewed medical journal devoted to sleep. And by the 90s, there were over 200 sleep labs and centers to treat sleep disorders in the US. Now, basically and elementarily, we can look at the function of sleep to be four: the restoration of the body and mind, memory consolidation, energy conservation, and regulation of metabolism and immune functions. That's why I agree with the provost that as a diabetologist, he should be a part of this society. Now, how brain restoration occurs during sleep? Now, according to the ALS Research Matters, in 2013, Dr. McKean and her colleagues at the University of Rochester, and Rochester is so key to the early fundamental work that was done in sleep, discovered a system that drains waste product from the brain. Now, they call it glymphatic system. Now, just as we talk about the lymphatic system outside the brain, glymphatic is something in the brain because it emanates from the brain's glial cells. The scientists also reported that glymphatic system can remove toxic protein called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid is known for being implicated for Alzheimer's disease, which at least takes the large percentage of the causes of dementia. Now, what is the regulation of metabolism and immune system as a function of sleep? Now, you will find out that the sleep is so important in glucose metabolism, and is especially important because it helps in insulin regulation. And also, if this, if those are deprived of sleep, they tend to be more prone to diabetes. Also, in appetite regulation, we have what we call the hormone for hunger, the ghrelin hormone, and also leptin, which we call the satiety hormone. The more leptin you have, the more you feel you are satisfied. The less of it you have, you now feel hungry. Ghrelin is also important in also regulating our hunger hormones. These two hormones are affected by sleep. Then we come to energy expenditure. Chronic sleep restriction have been associated with reduced energy expenditure and alteration in fat metabolism, contributing in addition to what we find with the fat-related hormones to the metabolic syndrome. Again, in cytokine regulation, when you sleep well, cytokines tend to function properly. And so it's very important in the immune system. And also in T cells dynamics. And also it's very important in immune memory consolidation. In fact, they found out that if you do a task that requires memory and you sleep, you are likely, after that task, you are likely to retain than if you do that task and you leave men awake. Now, why sleep? Now, people have used many terms for sleep. They talk of sleep health, they talk of sleep hygiene. Almost everyone who has written about health have defined health to rise on 3 pillars. They believe one is nutrition, the second one is sleep, and the third one is exercise. Now, many Harvard scholars contend that exercise is number one. I remember one of the scholars who said, if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, and you exercise regularly, you're likely going to live longer than somebody who doesn't have diabetes or hypertension and refuses to exercise. And you and I know about nutrition. But with the coming of sleep literature around the world, the tendency for people now to say that sleep is the foundation by which nutrition and exercise is built. That is, for example, if you exercise so well and you have a good nutrition and you refuse to sleep or you don't sleep well, you're actually going to dismantle the health advantages of these 2 other pillars of health. Now, physical health, sleep has been known to be so important in cardiovascular health, regulating hormone and metabolism. It enhances cognitive function and reduces stress and mood changes. I want to say that in many studies, if you don't sleep, you are likely going to show symptoms that point to ADHD, irritable, not able to concentrate, and then poor judgment. Overall well-being are improved by the quality of sleep and production. Usually when someone comes to do anything in the morning, the first thing I ask, have you had a good night's sleep? And if you have not had a good night's sleep, you've not done well. One of the greatest preachers that I know of used to say, the quality of a pastor's sermon in the morning depends on the quality of the sleep he had the night before. Stages of sleep. Now, we know that basically we have what we call the light sleep and the deep sleep. Now, the light sleep has about 3 stages. There's the drowsy phase, there's also the light sleep, then there's the moderate sleep. And then from there we move to the deep sleep. And then we now have the REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement. Now, in the non-REM sleep, there are 3 stages. There's a transition between wakefulness and sleep. Now, stage 2, there's light sleep, which the heart rate slows down. Then in stage 3, there's a deep sleep when tissue repair occurs. Then in the REM sleep, there's a rapid eye movement, dreaming occurs, and brain activity increases. I'm not sure if this pointer is working. So you can see from that diagram that more vivid dreaming is found in the REM sleep, but the deep sleep is found in the N3, and why light sleep is the N2. Now, these are the two sleeps that are compared, and the brain activity that takes place in both. They are similar, but they are not the same. In fact, science tells us that the first 10 minutes, REM and non-REM seem to be competing for relevance. And so as you sleep longer, there's a shift. But in the early phase, there's a sort of dominant competitiveness between the REM and also the non-REM. Now, when it comes to the REM, there's a lot of sympathetic activity. When they come to the non-REM, there is sympathetic activity is decreased. Respiratory increase during the REM sleep, and it's also decreased during the REM sleep. The predominant wave we find in the REM sleep is the theta wave, which is usually a very slower wave compared to the REM sleep. Now, these are things that oscillates throughout the period of sleep. REM sleep increases as the night grows, while the non-REM sleep decreases as it moves on. Now, current interest on sleep. Someone described this research as the biggest research in the world without any, there wasn't a research plan, there wasn't a protocol, but it was just an observational story. They found out that when, between the transition from winter to summer, when we seem to lose the nighttime, many cardiovascular catastrophes takes place. There is more heart disease, there are more heart attacks, and people started wondering why is that so? They found out that there's 10 to about 24% increase in heart attack on the Monday after the daylight savings. And there are a lot of stories about it, that there's a eternal time clock, and that this controversy will be due to sleep. But I want to say clearly here that those who are likely going to have a heart attack are those who are already predisposition, either by their cardiovascular health or their metabolic imbalance, to have heart attack. And there's more during the period of winter to spring. Now, sleep sufficiency, there's a term called sufficient sleep syndrome. And I think it was coined by Chita and Co. in 2018. And it's an accumulation of evidence has identified insufficient sleep as the first cause of the number of direct health consequences. These include impairment of physiological function. These include mental and cognitive deficits and mood emotional effects. Other downstream sequelae includes problems in the workplace and personal lives of affected individuals. When people don't sleep well, they trouble not only themselves, they trouble their workplace, they trouble their family, and they trouble their environment. Now, this so-called sufficient sleep syndrome has a lot of things associated with it, including cardiovascular, obesity, increased medical record, risk-taking behaviors, depression, industrial accident, problem with traffic safety, and hypertension. Now, it's so important that while we chase the other end of the spectrum, as people come with their pathology, if we can only correct this aspect of sleep, we'll be having less problems of people coming to the hospital because of what it entails. Now, in another study by Royal Philips in 2015, they found out that over 7,000 people surveyed in the United States, Brazil, and UK, and other Western countries. 96% said sleep is valuable to them. At the same time, 57 of respondents admitted that while their sleep could be better, they haven't taken action to improve it. And only 17% consistently sleep through the night, with 22% of respondents noticing that they wake up before they could, like 5 or 7 times a week. Now, about 100 million people suffer from obstructive sleep apnea. And people want more sleep, but they don't know how to get it. Now, when it comes to sleep disorder, there are a lot of literature on it. The most recent literature was that described by Mera et al. And they found out that the prevalence of sleep disorders have been growing significantly over the years, between the period of 2013 to 2016. According to this study, prevalence of obstructive sleep apnea increased 41% over the study period. Narcolepsy increases by 14%. Large increase in prevalence rate was also seen in hypersomnia in 32%, periodic limb movement in 30%, and rapid eye movement and sleep disorders in 64%. So we seem to be coming to a world, as we are transitioning to bigger technology, bigger development, sleep is no more becoming central in our daily living. How has the pandemic affected sleep? The Better Sleep Council conducted a survey in 2021 of a nationally represented sample of 2,000 Americans aged between 18 to 55 that included questions regarding the pandemic impact of sleep. Now, the survey found out that 48% of those who self-identified as poor sleepers say their mental health declined in the past year, particularly among parents. More than 2/3, that is 70%, say they woke up tired, and 60% say they rarely ever wake up rested or refreshed. Poor sleepers were also more likely to have increased screen time and alcohol consumption and also caffeine use during the pandemic, most of which are adversely affecting sleep. Sleep deprivation. Now, causes of sleep deprivation include things like stress, lifestyle choices, and medical conditions. Now, this is a diagram that shows that if you don't sleep well, it can lead to irritability, cognitive impairment, loss of moral judgment, hallucinations, impaired immune system, risks of diabetes. Diabetes is now the modern day epidemic, if not pandemic. Increased heart rate, increased reaction time, and growth suppression, risk of obesity, and decrease in temperature. Now, there is an important thing. These are almost everything that has to do with things that can lead to deep deprivation and the danger. And it's similar to what I've been saying for some time. Now, one of the big problems the world is coping with, and which billions have been spent on research, is Alzheimer's disease. And it is postulated that damaged brain cells can cause chronic inflammation and result in poor or restful sleep. Now, sleep deprivation prevents the cleanup of these toxic proteins that would normally be removed during sleep. Alzheimer's disease now causes excess beta amyloid proteins to clamp and build up plaques around the neuron, resulting in all the symptoms we know of: Alzheimer's, memory loss, behavioral changes, speech problems, and logic. You only need to have seen a patient with Alzheimer's disease. I remember someone was telling me that when the mother had it, the mother could not even recognize her at all. And that could be very, very terrible. What is good quality sleep? There are at least 5 ways in which we define a good quality sleep. One is the sleep duration over 24 hours. All the body of scientific evidence has agreed that any sleep below 7 hours is not a good quality sleep. And I've also said that anything that seems to exceed 9 hours tend to be excessive. So it's 7 to 9. Then there's also what they call the sleep efficiency. How before you get to bed, and how many times the time spent in the bed actually sleeping. If you spend less than 85%, that sleep is not efficient. Peter Drucker used to say, efficiency is not effectiveness. But then efficiency underpins effectiveness. The number of wakings. If you have to wake severally in the night, it becomes a problem. So people are more comfortable if your sleep is continuous. Then the objective or subjective assessment of yourself. Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel happy? That also determines the quality of sleep. Then sleep latency. This is the amount of time it takes to fall asleep after getting in bed and turning on the lights. I remember some sleep experts used to say that if you find that you cannot sleep, stop wasting your time in the bed. Go and do something else till you are able to sleep. Now, there are so many tips on how we can sleep better. And I can summarize it this: the lighting condition, the bed which you sleep, what you do before you sleep, and also your normal routine. The conclusion of all these things they mentioned is that 1, have a regular sleeping time. The time you go to bed and the time you sleep. People usually don't have that routine. 2, the lighter you eat before you sleep, the better, not a heavy meal. 3, your sleeping place should be reserved for sleep. Myself and my wife, we discuss this every day. I will wake up and tell my wife, I want everything out of my bed, out of our house. Only the bed and the lights. No, there should be no cell phone, nothing. And that's the best. So that your body will get accustomed to the fact that when you come to bed, it is time to sleep. And also, refuse things like caffeine. And I'll talk to you more later. Because caffeine has a very long half-life. And the time you take caffeine, you're likely gone. So all these things are, and then the temperature of the place you sleep also determine how you sleep. And then the way you control yourself and the things you generate during sleep. I mean, there are rules in my house which says, in the night, I don't want to discuss anything terrible. In the morning, I don't want to take anything that is serious. Everybody should stay cool on his own. Then after I have finished my exercise, spiritual and physical, we can face the other things. Now, here, there are certain tips for healthy sleep. And it's well outlined. No heavy food. There should be no blue light, which I explained today, no caffeine, no alcohol. Then things that are important, get up and sleep at the same time. Even light evening walks, but not weightlifting, a comfortable bed. Then remove beds full of clothes and shoes, get it off. A light, relaxing bath could be useful. And then your normal bedtime routine. What color of light is best for sleep? Now, it's agreed that red, orange, or yellow light are better for preparing the mind and body for sleep. You see, having a good sleep is something intentional. We have to plan for it. Now, but there are other things we call the blue light, which is the visible light spectrum for the human eye. And it varies from sunlight to all that comes in our present electronics, the less of blue light you have before you sleep and around when you sleep, the better for you to sleep. Sun is a blue light. Smartphone, computer, tablet, TV, LED. As a rule, I never put any tablet or phone in my bed. Without that, what I've ever been doing the things I do, I don't touch it. I sleep very early, and I don't pick up phones. So I think you have to make that decision to get off the blue light. Then, ways to stop blue light. Keep a sleep routine. Avoid screen time. Use night mode or dim your screen. Avoid natural light in the morning. Absorb natural light in the morning and avoid it in the night. Turn off fluorescent and LED lights after sunset. Wear blue light flood-free glasses. Sleep, caffeine, and alcohol. Now, caffeine is one of the greatest impediments to sleep. People rejoice in the fact that I met a doctor in the US. I said, how do you survive? He said, espresso. They rejoice in it. You go to conferences, you see people all awake. And the secret of being awake is the coffee. Now, about 80% of the world's population consumes caffeine every day. The mean half-life of caffeine is 7 hours, and sometimes it ranges between 1.5 to 9.5. So if, for example, you take coffee at 3, I know some people take coffee very much. I expect that 3 plus 9, what is it? You are still awake at 12, and that's half-life. It means it comes up, so you find it hard to sleep. And the plasma clearance is also poor. Now, there are many things that contain caffeine, and coffee is about 51%, and it can actually deprive sleep in 58%. Those who average 78 hours of sleep are few. So if you take caffeine, you have 58%. Soda, it's also a bad one, 52%. Tea, has 10%, but if you take tea, 75% of those who take tea at the right time will still have a good sleep. Then energy drinks is also implicated. So of all these ones that we take, energy drink is not good for certain reasons. So all these things will destroy your ability to sleep. Now, caffeine, we know, has some positive effects. It makes you alert, and they say low risk for diabetes. I think Professor Kolawole can agree or disagree. It can increase your metabolic rate, and it can really make you active, But what caffeine actually does is that your normal adrenaline boost, you know what I mean, is obliterated. And so when you now take caffeine, you actually suppress your activity after a while. So you need more caffeine to retain that thing. So you become addicted to it. It leads to addiction, anxiety, blood pressure, control muscle movement, and stimulates urine. Now, sleep versus alcohol. Low amounts of alcohol decrease sleep quality by 9.3%. Moderate alcohol use decrease sleep quality by 24%. And high amounts of alcohol decrease sleep quality by 39.2%. You know that almost all science is now coming to one conclusion: don't touch alcohol. It has shifted to say taking alcohol moderately to better avoid alcohol. How does sleep cause diabetes? Now, we talked about the fact that the short sleep duration is less than 6 hours, and 28% risk of type 2 diabetes compared to 7.8%. Shift work and circadian rhythm, those who have it, they have more rates of having type 2 diabetes. And then there are many pathogenesis which are going to increase insulin resistance, hormone deregulation, and inflammatory and sympathetic activation. Now, sleep mortality and morbidity. Now, it is clear that if you look at this mortality ratio and then the hours of sleep, if you sleep 2.5 to 3.5 times, you are likely going to die early and relatively compared. And you now begin to go on as you increase, and the best one that keeps you on, so you have 6.5 to 7.5. Now, by the time you now increase the amount of sleep, it's like a U-curve. Lesser sleep, bigger mortality. And then more sleep, bigger mortality. In general, sleep duration is associated with mortality in a U-shaped fashion, so that the lowest rate is more often found in the group who report sleep duration of 7.8. Recently, I spoke in a conference, and somebody was telling me, I know this man has achieved a lot in life. And actually, he boasts that he has only slept for 4 hours every day. I said, I pray for him that he could keep on being healthy. But if things happen to him, don't forget your statement. Nearly uniformity and mortality is better when we keep our sleep at 7 to 8 hour range. Now, these are all studies that still show the fact that if you don't sleep well, you have more cardiovascular risk. If you don't sleep well, your mental function is affected, so-called insufficient sleep syndrome. Now, sleep and morbidity, I've talked a lot about that. In almost all the diseases, especially in obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, neurological conditions, these are increased when you don't sleep well. Sleep and morbidity, almost all the things, arrhythmias, affects your rate, hypertension, sleep problems, and all these conditions are associated with poor sleep. Sleep and economic deprivation. Now, if you look at the studies from Western countries, United States, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, and Canada, if you don't sleep well, you can affect the GPD of all these countries, US being the highest. And so the less sleep you have can affect the economy of every nation. Can we assume that if nationally the degree of sleep of a nation affects the economy, individually, the degree of sleep could also affect the quality of your economy? I know what I put that one there before you tell me of a businessman who doesn't sleep. Now, economic cost of insufficiency, less sleep, there is absenteeism and also presenteeism. Presenteeism that you're at work, but they're not at work, they sleep most of the time. Someone said that he made a trip around many offices in Nigeria and said that if you go to most offices in Nigeria by 11 to 1, people are asleep. I actually experimented. I went to see one of the big people in campus, and I knocked, no open. Then I knocked again. There's somebody open up, and I found that the secretary had his mouth spread on the secretary and was fully sleeping. Then it has a high economic toll on us. Sleep deprivation versus accident. Now, dangers of drowsy sleeping. I have seen this physically while we were in Lagos. Somebody was driving, drowsy, and actually went to hit a car. Within the twinkle of an eye. So it can lead to, and drivers who get less than 5 hours of sleep have crash risk similar to driving over the legal limit for alcohol. Fatal crashes. 1 in 5 fatal crashes are involved in a drowsy driver. 1 in 5. As When I was doing my house job, I took a taxi. Yes, when I took my house job, I took a taxi. And as I was driving, the man was driving, suddenly the man fell asleep. And we were all outside the road. I have to speak both in interpretable and non-interpretable tongues. Okay. Sleep deprivation and accident. You see the rates here, we have to go up all over. Then sleep apnea. We know about sleep apnea, and studies are going on over the world about it. More common in men. They snore so much and pauses breathing, unusual breathing pattern, frequent wakes, snoring, feeling restless, night sweats, headaches, sexual dysfunction, mood changes, shortness of breath on waking up, daytime fatigue, and trouble concentrating. Now, risk factors for sleep apnea are so many, and I think the other part of the study or the lecture, you go through it. Sleep research outcomes in Nigeria. Now, looking at this study by Adewale in 2029, in which we found out that out of the 370 respondents, there was overall prevalence of snoring in 31%, and 19% have risk of OSAS. And the highest risk of OSAS is more in 15-19. I look at a couple of studies in Nigeria. Some have been done in Ife, and it's not, by any means, it's not very elaborate, but all of these research are coming up. And we have published some in our journal that sleep creates a lot of sleep deprivation, a lot of challenges, a lot of problems. And you can study it. Quite a lot has been done here in Ife. You can look at it and see what it tells. Now, for me, every morning I have one routine. I'm sorry I want to take to my own faith. And I pray 3 Psalms every morning. And I pray the Psalm 121. I pray the Psalm 63, Psalm 23. But I remember in Psalm 121 it says that he that keepeth Israel, I usually say that keepeth me, neither sleep nor gets drowsy. The word there is slumber. And so if a person says he doesn't sleep, he must be like God. And if God says he doesn't sleep and he doesn't slumber, why take his position? And so what I do before I sleep is the principle of offloading. I see myself in a big, vast ocean, in which I offload my heart and all my problems in the sea of God's forgetfulness. And when I sleep, my sleep is always sweet. Now, my parting words. One of the 3 pillars of health is sleep. People are now coming to say that sleep is more. Sleep deprivation is a short-term and long-term cause of severe health consequences. Specific conditions like OSA, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, myocardial infarction are associated with sleep deprivation. Sleep requires intentionality. You have to make it intentional. There's a need for concerted effort and all related discipline to stem the tide of this pandemic because of the physical, mental, relational, and economic impact to our society. There's a need for more studies and establishment of centers both for treatment and research across the country. I want to thank Professor Kamala Fair and this team for establishing this society. I hope that this will invariably lead to good sleep hygiene in the larger society and make room for research in patient care. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. May we all sleep deep when we sleep and wake up refreshed. Thank you.